It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Jerusalem. Our top story. The world holds its breath as Israel plans its retaliation to the Iranian missile attack, and the propaganda war escalates. Israel strikes 200 targets in Lebanon as the World Health Organization says that 28 health workers have been killed there in the past day.
Also coming up on Sky News at 10, the government accused of a betrayal after striking a deal to surrender control of an Indian Ocean paradise that houses a British naval base. Inside a former no-go zone, we report from Khartoum on the devastation and desperation of people living surrounded by gunfire. Plus, compassion or a slippery slope. MPs will have the chance to debate changing the law on assisted dying later this month. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Hello and good evening from Jerusalem. Israel has conducted an intensive round of strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon as they attempt to degrade its ability to operate both in Beirut and on its border with Israel. But reports of 28 health workers being killed in the past 24 hours shows the danger of the situation to the wider population. Tonight, on the West Bank, reports of at least 14 deaths after an Israeli airstrike on a Palestinian refugee camp. And the battle with Iran seemingly on hold for now. President Biden said today that he did not expect an Israeli retaliation for Tuesday's missile strikes immediately. Well, over the last 24 hours, the Israeli Air Force has continued its aerial campaign, targeting what it says is Hezbollah capabilities in southern Lebanon. Today, 3 large consecutive explosions were heard in southern Beirut. Sky's Data and Forensics Unit has verified the locations of 2 of those strikes, including an airstrike to an apartment block in Darir in southern Beirut. In a moment, we'll hear from our international correspondent, John Sparks, who's in Beirut. But first, our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, has this report from northern Israel.
A message of defiance from Iran, vowing victory. Also plastered on the side of missiles, images of the political leader of Hamas and the head of Hezbollah, both killed in Israeli strikes. The video released by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard purports to show last Tuesday's revenge attack on Israel, edited with a religious song used at times of war. Impossible to tell if these were the actual strikes. But the aim seems to be to demonstrate Iran's firepower in a fight where words and images are as much of a weapon as bullets and bombs. Despite the impression of destruction, Israel has insisted most of the incoming fire was intercepted. This is what's left of one of the missiles, shot down over open ground in the south. Yet satellite imagery suggests an Israeli airbase did suffer a hit. This was the site on Sunday, and again on Wednesday. A building on the right appears to have been damaged. The United States helped to defend Israel's skies from the onslaught. Its president was asked if he would allow Israel to strike back.
We don't allow Israel, we advise Israel, and there's nothing going to happen today. We'll talk about that later.
As the world waits to see how Israel will respond, its forces are already fighting on multiple other fronts against groups aligned with Iran. The biggest battle right now is across the border in Lebanon, where ground troops are locked in an offensive against Hezbollah. Israel's air defences are playing a key role in this war too. Here they respond to incoming Hezbollah fire. The threat to communities across the north is why Israel says it's fighting in Lebanon. An elderly woman lives in this house in a town a few miles back from the border. A rocket landed last week just as she stepped inside and out of danger. Her son is helping to tidy up.
How is she?
She is a strong woman.
The local security chief says it's about time Israel went on the attack.
We are fighting here and we are protecting our home. We'll fight, even if we need, we will die for it, and we will win.
It's why Israel is pushing more troops into Lebanon. But this is tough terrain and a risky mission that's only part of a much wider war. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Northern Israel.
Well, as the conflict continues on Lebanon's border with Israel, Israel continues to strike at the heart of the Lebanese capital. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, sent us this report from Beirut.
In central Beirut, we found the contents of the third floor of an apartment block scattered in the streets. An office chair, a high-vis vest, packages of scrubs and surgical gowns. This place was supposed to be safe.
I don't feel safe at all. This is a war of destruction, a war against the people, against freedom, against the cultural life of the Lebanese.
The Israelis struck 200 targets in Lebanon overnight. These blasts recorded in Beirut's southern suburbs. But the city center is generally left alone. What was the Israeli military trying to destroy then, above the shisha shop on Bashura Street? The third floor was used by paramedics and first responders from a group called Islamic Health Society. It's linked to Hezbollah, but offers services to everyone. A group of paramedics were asleep, we were told, when the missiles struck.
There is plenty of evidence here that this civil defense center was a civil defense center. Have a look at this. There are plastic gloves on the ground, a stethoscope, different types of bandages, that sort of thing. An indication to us and certainly to local residents that this spot didn't have a military function.
No warning was given before the strike and no explanation provided afterwards by Israel. It's an outrage, said a Hezbollah MP.
Unless a decisive decision is being taken by the international community to stop this Israeli killing machine, you're going to witness more and more. And we have no alternative but to fight back, to defend our people and to protect them. Thank you. Thank you.
A few kilometers to the south, Israel has been pounding the suburbs, like the district of Dahia. It says Hezbollah stores and manufactures weapons here, but residents don't believe it.
This used to be a garage, and that was a spy shop. There's nothing here. They just give us excuses. There's nothing here to justify the bombing.
Amongst today's targets, Hezbollah's media office, which took a contingent of journalists, including Sky News, on a tour of Dahia yesterday. Its military wing and its message, both under attack. The strike on this center, a breach of international law, says the EU's top diplomat, as 28 medics die in the last 24 hours, according to the UN. It seems the health of the nation is under attack.
Well, John joins me now from Beirut. And John, the intensity of Israel's airstrikes continuing to be very apparent tonight.
That is right, and I think it goes without saying that Beirut is really on the front line now. And to illustrate the point, just before we came to air, the sky behind me lit up, some bright orange and red, very large series of explosions taking place. We're looking south towards the district of Dahia in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Another heavy Israeli bombing mission carrying out, you can see that is a sizable explosion and completely in keeping with what we have seen today. A big increase in the intensity of the Israeli bombardment, an increase in the geographical scale, the geographical spread of the Israeli bombardment as well. You know, even 30 kilometers to the north of Beirut, targets there were hit for the first time. And we have seen the center of the city as well hit for the second time. This medical facility hosting paramedics, hosting first responders as well. You know, that place was just a few meters really from the Lebanese parliament, pretty close to the British embassy. There's a big regional UN compound there as well. And you know what? It has an effect. People don't feel safe here. Also, in the center of Beirut, you've got tens of thousands of displaced people as well. This country trying to deal with 1.2 million people who've been forced from their homes. A lot of people have come to Beirut. They see the center of the city, or at least they have, as a sanctuary. In that building with the medical facility, some of those apartments had upwards of 20 IDPs in each apartment building. So, you know, I think people here are feeling very vulnerable indeed now.
John, updating us with those latest pictures from Beirut. Thank you. Well, I'll be back a little later in Sky News at 10, but for now, let's go to Gillian for the rest of today's news. Gillian.
Anna, thank you. Good evening. The UK has ended a 50-year dispute with Mauritius by handing over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. Locals were forced to leave their homes in the 1970s to make way for a British-US military base. As part of the deal, the UK will continue to operate the base, but opposition politicians have claimed that it's a betrayal of British interests and a strategic boost to China. Here's our correspondent, Matthew Thompson.
The picture-perfect Chagos Islands. But these serene white sands have been the subject of over half a century of furious controversy. Since the 1960s, Britain's control of this remote part of the Indian Ocean has been disputed by neighbouring Mauritius. The largest island, Diego Garcia, is home to a major US-UK military base. A handful of Chagos Islanders, long forced to abandon their homes, have fought a running legal battle to be allowed to return. It's been called Britain's last African colony, and now the UK has agreed to hand control to Mauritius.
Some people thought that it might have been impossible for a small country like Mauritius to have achieved justice against superpowers. Despite all this, we remain true to our convictions to end colonisation in our country.
The deal keeps the military base intact, but some Conservatives say it sets a dangerous precedent.
Although the airbase, which is jointly UK-US operated, is maintained on a 99-year lease, the other outlying islands go back to Mauritian sovereignty. Now, there are many other countries which would be interested in a permanent base in the Indian Ocean, China being one of them.
And as for the islanders themselves, those we spoke to are furious.
It's a day of mourning for the Chagosian people, like myself, like the vast majority, because we've been excluded from those negotiations, and they decided the fate of the island, the future of the island, without even consulting the population. The Chagosian people, who are at the heart of this tragedy, they should be aware of that. So if talking about historic for who?
All of my grandparents, brothers, sisters, my mum was born there as well.
Many fled to the UK, having initially been sent to Mauritius, where they say they were treated like dirt. They're sceptical of ever being allowed home.
If I had a choice, I would go back home. This is not home. It isn't home. It will never be home. Even if I die here, it will still never be my home. Why didn't they just send us back?
So in spite of all the backslapping diplomacy, trouble looks set to continue in paradise. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
To Sudan now, and Sky News has gained frontline access in the capital Khartoum, where the army is trying to regain ground long held by rebel forces. The city has been at the centre of a devastating war that broke out between the army and RSF rebels in April last year. The RSF has held on to Khartoum City and Khartoum North for 18 months as the Sudanese armed forces gained access across the river in Omdurman. In the last few days, the army crossed the White Nile Bridge, entering the heart of the capital, where battles are ongoing. They've also moved east, crossing Hellfire Bridge, and are fighting to reclaim territory in neighbourhoods in Khartoum North. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El Bagir, has this report.
An impossible crossing, made possible. A deadly impasse, now passable. After a year and a half of war, Sudan's army is finally reclaiming territory across the Nile. This bridge was no man's land. Civilians couldn't cross it, the military couldn't cross it. But since it's fallen under the army's control, the pathway between Durman and the north of Khartoum has now been opened. This is Khartoum North, known as Bahri, one of the 3 cities of the capital, partly liberated, but left in ruins. But for now, the damage feels immaterial, eclipsed by soldiers celebrating victory. Not just for a strip of land, but for entering a new era in their fight against the RSF. And for some of them, the joy of coming home. It's a beautiful feeling to come to where you're from after a year and a half, he says. We move deeper into the devastated neighborhoods, looking for the few families that couldn't flee. Faiza is still trembling from everything her family has endured. Trapped in a nightmare of RSF terror.
It was hell. No one can imagine how we were living.
They still live with the gunfire, but now it's outgoing. Their whole area, an army defense position. And all around them are the empty homes of their neighbors, overturned and stripped of material value. The fight is far from over. RSF snipers and rocket launchers are pounding the edges of this pocket. This is a mixed road through northern Khartoum, and some gunfire is now going across because this bus stop is the front line. And given the nature of urban warfare, they expect that anywhere beyond this point, they can find the enemy. More soldiers move in as we move out from a part of the capital that's finally free from its siege, but still gripped by a war that's tearing Sudan apart.
And Yusra joins me now live. Yusra, we saw there the scenes of devastation in your report. What does it actually mean for the wider community? Where have these people gone?
So many have fled, Gillian. These are just the few families that are left. Millions of people have fled. This is currently the largest internal displacement crisis in the world, but there are also 2 million, at least 2 million people who've gone to neighboring countries and beyond. Now, this family, you know, the grief, the despair, and how shaken they are, it's just one family out of hundreds, thousands of families who've endured similar terror, who've endured the besieged life under siege under the RSF. Now, this is just also very much in relation to where you live. They lived in an area that was completely occupied by the RSF, that was a defense and an offensive position, with the army firing in, as well as airstrikes kind of constantly used as a form of defense by the army. There are other areas, like where we are, that are under army control, that are much safer than where they lived, and even safer than how they're living now, considering they're now an army defense position in an extremely volatile area of the capital. But deeper in the heart of the city, in the heart of Khartoum, is the most intense battles, particularly now for the fight to reclaim the capital. So what you're seeing here is just a very small glimpse, but incredibly representative of the devastation that's happening in one of the biggest cities in the region.
Yusra, stay safe. Thank you. The House of Commons will have the opportunity to debate changing the law on assisted dying after an MP pledged to introduce a private member's bill later this month. Families who've risked prosecution to help loved ones to an assisted death overseas welcomed the prospect, but others, including some medical professionals, warned of a slippery slope. Here's our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi.
Anne assisted her husband's death. Jeff had motor neurone disease and was paralysed from the neck down. He faced an agonising death.
Everything had to be done for him, literally. He couldn't hold a glass, he had to be fed, toileted, everything.
They travelled to Switzerland together to a clinic where he died surrounded by close family and friends.
It hit me when he took the medication, but he died in my arms, telling me he loved me. He said, "I love you so," and that was it. It was the most peaceful end, and I have met so many friends whose loved ones have died in distressing circumstances, but I don't have these horrible memories because I lost a dearly loved man who died telling me he loved me.
Anne faced 14 years in jail, but the law might soon be changed to allow assisted dying. The biggest concern around assisted dying is the slippery slope argument. It means that the legislation is introduced for one specific group of patients, for example, the terminally ill, and then it's extended to include more and more groups. The MP introducing the bill says she's aware of the concerns and wants a full and honest debate.
I think there is a perception around the slippery slope concept which actually isn't reality. I think the other really important point is, let's look at the situation as it stands. The law at the moment is not fit for purpose. We need to be really clear and set proper protections and safeguards. There needs to be proper medical intervention, there needs to be judicial intervention, so that this is not just a free-for-all.
Some campaigners against assisted dying are worried palliative care could be further neglected if the law changes.
We're concerned that those who are most vulnerable will be most disadvantaged by this legislation, and that they may come under pressure to take their own lives. And instead, we should respond by funding palliative care. We don't even fund core palliative care services on the NHS.
Anne has lost her husband, but he was able to choose how and when he died. She wants that freedom extended to anyone faced with the same agonising life and death choices. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
A man has been arrested over a suspected acid attack on a girl outside a West London school. A warning, we're about to show you images of some of the injuries sustained by the girl. The 14-year-old was left with potentially life-changing injuries after the incident in Westbourne Park on Monday. A 35-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. A luxury cruise ship that's been stranded in Belfast since May is finally on its way. Engine problems followed by paperwork issues have delayed the start of Odyssey's 3.5-year round-the-world voyage and is estimated to have cost its owners millions of pounds, none of which stopped the champagne flowing. A disabled single mother has told Sky News how being prosecuted for failing to pay the TV licence fee left her feeling terrified. She was amongst 31,000 people prosecuted via a fast track through the justice system, most of them women. Katie Spencer reports.
I still have panic attacks now.
Speaking to us anonymously, this disabled mum of two who we're calling Claire says she never imagined she'd find herself facing criminal prosecution. Her ex-partner had controlled their finances and didn't tell her he wasn't paying their bills. Not long after he was jailed for domestic violence, someone knocked on her door asking why she hadn't bought a TV licence.
A week after, I got a letter saying that I was going to get prosecuted.
She couldn't afford to send off for the paperwork that would prove her domestic situation, and with just 21 days to respond, she felt she had to plead guilty.
It's terrifying because, all you think is, well, if I don't pay this, are they going to put me in prison? And I've got 2 kids.
Under the Conservative government, various reviews looked into decriminalising non-payment of the TV licence fee and came to nothing. While some newspapers have recently claimed Labour intends to scrap licence fee prosecutions, Sky News understands that's not the case. Officially, all that's being said for now is that ahead of the next charter review, the government isn't ruling out making changes to how non-payment is enforced, but says it'll consult widely before making a decision.
The licence fee has, of course, always been the corporation's bread and butter. But given that 500,000 households cancelled theirs last year, there are some fundamental questions as to the sustainability of the current system. Questions that are making it increasingly hard for the bosses to justify still treating non-payment as a prosecutable offence when there arguably might be better ways to collect their cash without criminalising people like Claire.
TV licence prosecutions are dealt with via a system called the Single Justice Procedure. SJPs are basically a fast-track route through the justice system. Almost 31,000 people were prosecuted for the offence last year, and a disproportionate number of which, just over 73%, were women. The vast majority of cases processed by a single magistrate in private and without a hearing. And because of the way the system is designed, letters from defendants often go unread by prosecutors. Even the Magistrates Association says the system has flaws.
We're not talking here about throwing the whole system out, but the TV Licensing Authority should have to see all pleas and mitigations from defendants before those cases come before magistrates. And that will give the authority the opportunity to decide to withdraw those cases if they believe it isn't in the public interest to pursue them.
The SJP system itself was designed to fix delays, brought in because it's efficient and effective. But fast doesn't always equate to fair when people like Claire feel they have no option but to plead guilty. TV licensing says prosecution is always a last resort and that they've the ability to overturn a conviction and intend to contact Claire to review what happened.
All evidence is evidence, so if this person is vulnerable in any sort of way, they should look into that.
A single mother criminalised and now using her universal credit to pay a fine which she arguably shouldn't have been prosecuted for in the first place. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
When Sir Keir Starmer announced yesterday that he would pay back thousands of pounds of donations, he probably hoped that would draw a line under a damaging row. Instead, the focus has now shifted to senior members of his cabinet, including the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister, over whether they too will pay back money. Here's our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh.
We need to clean up politics.
For many, this is why the row over freebies matters.
And I invite you all to join our mission to stop the chaos, turn the page.
It was a promise to clean up politics made in opposition. Opponents are holding the Prime Minister to in office.
You have given us a clear mandate to restore service and respect to politics.
Keir Starmer admitted he will pay back £6,000 worth of gifts he accepted as Prime Minister. But the now reignited discussion has thrust the PM's conduct back into the spotlight.
On the repayment, I can't say any more than I did. We're going to drop some principles until they're in, which will guide everybody. Until they're in place, I thought it was right to repay these particular payments.
The itemised list of freebies now deemed unacceptable includes 6 Taylor Swift tickets, 4 Doncaster Races tickets, and a clothing, rental and hair and makeup session for his wife Victoria. And now Labour's long-standing MP Diane Abbott says her party's leader is in the pocket of millionaires.
I do think as a general rule, when millionaires give a lot of money to individual politicians, they're not just doing it out of altruism. At some point, they think that that politician is going to, listen to them.
He is still within the rules and he's saying he's being transparent.
Giving back any money at all makes it look as if you are now realising that you did something wrong.
From the polling you've done, how damaging is this for Keir Starmer?
I think this is damaging for Keir Starmer. He's still got plenty of time to turn things around before a general election result, but this has now been going on for weeks, and we have seen it correspond with quite a precipitous drop in his personal approval ratings. In fact, a couple of places now have him as even less popular than Rishi Sunak.
While the government have promised new principles around declarations will be coming shortly, Baroness Harriet Harman says a Cobra-style meeting should be conducted to decide them.
We need to have some new rules and new processes. They're going some way towards that, but actually they haven't quite got there yet, and they need to appoint their new ethics commissioner to bring this all together.
For those hoping the row over gifts can be killed off quickly, those new rules can't come quick enough. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News, Westminster.
And you can scan the QR code on your screen now to use our Westminster Accounts tool to find out what gifts and donations your MP has declared.
Well, welcome back to Jerusalem. Families across Israel are currently marking Jewish New Year in an atmosphere where celebration is overshadowed by trepidation about the future. I've been speaking to some of them.
Hey, my friend.
A family coming together for Jewish New Year. But the festivities are quiet and they are reeling. 2 days ago, in the hours before Iran attacked Israel, their close friend was among the victims of the Hamas attack on the Tel Aviv suburb, Jaffa.
We take my family down to the
Shelter.
And the people with the guards kill my neighbors, and I very afraid.
It feels different. As you can see, everything is empty over here. It's usually very crowded, a lot of people.
The synagogue provides solace for Dan and Shulamit Levy, newly settled in Israel from the UK. For them, it is the uncertainty each day of knowing if their 2 sons have been recalled to the army.
It's impossible to make plans at the moment. It's minute by minute.
The celebrations this year have been very muted. We are praying at the same time as our children and grandchildren are serving in the army. And it's very emotional to pray this year because the words take on an extra significance because they're real.
The traditions kept alive, the shofar, the ram's horn blown. But these are different times. The Azeri family, though, visiting their grandmother for the holidays, are unbowed.
I don't feel fear.
Even if Israel retaliates against Iran and Iran fires back, you don't feel afraid?
No. I feel that Israel is strong. We have a good friends, England, America. We feel secure.
No, we're not afraid, actually. It's, we're living for a long time like that. And this is our country, and we need to fight for it. And we don't have another place to go.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the editor of the Courier in Dundee, David Clegg, and the former Conservative MP, who's now Chief Executive of the charity Business in the Community, Mary McLeod. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Mail, its headline, Starmer's Surrender. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the editor of the Courier in Dundee, David Clegg, and the former Conservative MP, who's now Chief Executive of the charity Business in the Community, Mary McLeod. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. In the Times, they say the Prime Minister defied the US over the decision to cede the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Officials, they say, warned Sir Keir Starmer that the deal could hand China a strategic spying post. The deal is also the lead in the Mail, who brand the move Starmer's surrender. According to the Financial Times, Joe Biden's remarks appearing to endorse the idea of Israel retaliating against Iran by targeting its oil industry have pushed crude oil prices to their highest for a month. That story also takes the lead in the Eye. Their headline, energy price scare after Biden says Israel could attack Iran's oil. Dame Esther Rantzen is on the front of the Express after an announcement there will be a free vote on assisted dying in the Commons. She says, I never thought I'd be alive to see the law change, but perhaps I will. In an exclusive interview with The Telegraph, Boris Johnson says the UK needs a referendum on the European Court of Human Rights, as it doesn't provide Britain's freedoms they wouldn't otherwise have. The Mirror has more on the photos of the Princess of Wales that surfaced yesterday, carrying an exclusive interview with a teenager suffering from cancer. The Metro reports on the murder trial of a doctor accused of impersonating a visiting nurse to inject his sick stepfather's intravenous drugs with poison. The Sun says the popular quiz show Bullseye is to make a comeback, and it's set to be hosted by cricket star Freddie Flintoff. And the Star says Wi-Fi and phones could be wiped out on Saturday by what they're calling a sun burp. Their headline, brace yourself, Bessie. I'm guessing that's not a technical term. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by David Clegg and Mary McLeod. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Times and the Chagos Islands, a region perhaps not many had heard of before today. David?
I've certainly not been there. I confirm that is the case. This is the story that the islands are going to be handed back to Mauritius in a deal that will see the military base, which is largely a US military base, being kept there. Now, the announcement of that deal today comes after quite a long period of debate. In fact, some international court claims, and this had started under the previous Conservative government and then now has been signed off by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party in government today. But it's causing a lot of controversy, and the Times has a slightly fresh line on it, which is saying that this happened despite private warnings from the US administration that this was a bad idea, and fears that China could establish listening posts on the neighbouring island. It does seem a bit of a strange story in that Joe Biden today had welcomed the deal. In fact, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, said it was a win for diplomacy, I believe. But the Times is reporting that privately, but they're actually quoting a Whitehall source saying it's baffling that this has happened given that we're effectively in a Cold War with China. But however, other government insiders denied that the suggestion that the US had privately warned against the deal or ministers had defied official civil service advice. So it is a little bit unclear about what's going on here, and there has been an attempt from the candidates for the Conservative Party leadership to make political hay out of this today. That seems quite difficult, given it seems that certainly some form of deal was brewing under the Conservatives. And this element about whether America were privately concerned about it seems strange, given the welcome it's had in Washington. So quite what's going on behind the scenes there is not completely clear to me.
But Mary, I mean, the line that their concerns that Mauritius could lease some of the islands to China and therefore giving Beijing more influence, that's really the contention, isn't it?
Yes, and it's the strategic positioning of those islands, the Chagos Islands, because they are right there sort of between Africa and Indonesia, and therefore it's really sort of, I guess, worrying in terms of what that influence could be. I mean, Chinese development finance initiatives, there's already 47 of them on the islands. They're growing in I guess, influence across the islands. So there is a bit of confusion around the US position on this, and so more will no doubt come out on it. But it's also secondly that Beijing influence. Some of the commentary has also been about, this is just a sort of slippery slope to giving up other territories. It's happened during recess. Parliament doesn't go back till Monday. So therefore, was this they were trying to do this in a surreptitious way? Who knows? But it's certainly the important bit was the airbase. It's a US-UK airbase, 99-year lease. But of course, time tends to fly by quite quickly, so there's certainly concern about it, but the
airbase remains. It
remains, yes.
And the line you're saying about slippery slope, some speculation and accusations that this will lead to Keir Starmer, questioning the rights over the Falklands, over Gibraltar, and this is just the beginning.
They have been very quick to deny that suggestion that the Falklands is safe, as the headline in one of the other papers today. I think the issue is here is that there has been a sense that the international climate was against this, that it was going to be difficult to sustain it indefinitely, and therefore some kind of deal needed to be arranged so that they could have certainty over the base, because it's probably as strategically crucial now, given the international climate at the moment, than it's ever been. So the reward of having it sustained for 99 years, although I take the point that, who knows how that progresses and whether they try to change the deal subsequently. It feels like there's been concern that getting something over the line here to make sure that this asset is in place for the foreseeable future is what has driven that. And that is a very different situation to what we see in the Falklands, which obviously have a lot more psychological significance to the British state. And it feels that there's been a tactical decision here made on a military basis. So that which makes me wonder about this idea that the Americans have been opposed to it, because it is.
And it may be that they were initially, but given it's a US-UK airbase, they must have had
but certainly
some agreement.
Reported quite differently, that story. Take us to the Eye, Mary, and a story which certainly highlights the power of whatever the American President Joe Biden says. Oil prices set to soar, and this is after his comments saying that he's been discussing possible retaliatory strikes on facilities in Iran with Israel.
Yes, and this is in essence, crude oil has gone up about 5%, so they're saying oil prices are soaring, and it just shows the connection and link there is between just all that's happening geopolitically. And it just takes one story that can affect the markets and create that inflationary impact on fuel prices. And of course, that is petrol prices for the UK customer as part of that. So it is a really important story around that energy resilience and what we do as a country for that, and just how the narrative and the rhetoric has to be really carefully put on some of this, because it will affect the markets.
I think that's what worried me, really. I mean, given the instability in the Middle East at the minute, the fact that we are in such a dangerous moment, it seems clear that oil prices were going to go up. But it is Joe Biden's remarks in particular that have caused this, and on the Financial Times as well is what they're directly linking to. And he said, asked whether the US would support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities, the US president said, we're in a discussion of that. And then he added, I think it would be a little anyway. And if you actually watch the clip, which you guys have been airing through the evening, it felt like one of those Joe Biden moments where you weren't quite clear that he was certain in what he was trying to articulate. And I think that just goes to show that, you know, this is could cause a major economic shock. And
you think it's possibly a gaffe?
It was clearly an off-the-cuff comment. There was no doubt about that. He just walked over to the reporters and started talking.
But it feels
and it's also, it's not carefully expressed. It's not quite clear to me even in his wording exactly what he means. So I do think that is a cause for concern.
Mary, take us to the Express. Quote from Esther Ranson there, Dame Esther Ranson. I never thought I'd be alive to see the law change, but perhaps I will.
Well, this so this has given her some hope, and she has really led a strong and emotional, heartfelt campaign about assisted dying. And it will be a free vote in Parliament, I'm sure, as part of this, and it could be done before the end of the year. So it's given her hope that there might be a positive outcome. She wants, of course, assisted dying legalised in her lifetime, because of course she has got her own personal stage 4 lung cancer, and so therefore she really wants to be able to make that choice for herself. It's a really difficult one. I think people are very divided on assisted dying, and I think certainly in Parliament it didn't get through the last time on assisted dying. I think a lot of people are worried about, again, how do you contain the decision making on it, and who makes that decision and at what point? And so there's lots of things within it.
But there could be a vote as soon as next month. Okay. Mary and David, thank you very much for the moment. Much more coming up after the break. Boris Johnson tells The Telegraph he thinks there should be a referendum on the UK's membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. We'll be discussing that next. Don't go anywhere.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
Now, freedom!
There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, David Clegg and Mary McLeod. Let's have a delve into the Telegraph, shall we, David? As I cut you off before the break, you can kick us off.
I don't hold a grudge.
So Boris Johnson is saying that we should hold a referendum re-membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. He says there's a strong case to give the public a say.
This is Boris Johnson, who obviously is promoting his new memoir, which it feels like it's been going on for about 2 years of promotion on this thing. I've read so much about it in the last few days. But this is an interview with the Telegraph in which he has suggested that there should be a referendum on the ECHR. Now, as someone who reported on the Scottish independence referendum and the Brexit referendum, I can say that my strong conclusion from that experience was there should never be referendums on anything because A, they don't settle the issue, and B, they just cause more problems than they're worth. I think they're a terrible way to settle a question like this. So I fear that this is not really a serious suggestion from him, actually, because if you, it's a very entertaining read, this Telegraph front page, because other things that he says during this is that Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump had still been US president, and that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tried to bug his toilet. So I should say it was his toilet in the Foreign Office, not his personal toilet. So there's a lot going on here, but I think obviously this is a touchstone issue for a lot on the right of the Conservative Party, and he will be garnering support from some quarters there. But I think the chances that this is going to be an issue that the Labour government would want to open up is very slim, and I also don't think that it would deal or address with any of the issues that that this tends to get raised in the context of.
Mary, former Conservative MP, do you agree with Boris Johnson? On the ECHR at least?
Well, it's interesting what the other candidates are saying, because Rod Jenrick is saying, let's get out. The others are saying, let's try and change reform, and if we can't change it, then maybe get out. So Boris is playing an interesting line here about the referendum, and I agree with you about referendums. I remember telling him how close, telling David Cameron how close the Scottish referendum would be one day around the cabinet table.
So you disagree with the thoughts for a referendum on the ECHR?
But also his comments about COVID are interesting. So there will be some really interesting points, and as I read, and he apologises to children whose education was damaged by the months of school closures, although he still thinks lockdowns saved life. So I think there will be lots to still read and come out in his book.
It's 740 pages long, apparently, if you are brave enough to take that on.
Yeah. Just very quickly, let's have a look at the Metro. We've got a few seconds to talk about the King meeting Grace Jones. Do people know who she is? Or remember, I do, but I'm just wondering if there's a certain generation that doesn't know who she is.
I'm not that familiar with her musical output. I remember from the James Bond film she was in more than anything else.
Yes, and it's her hats as well. I think Philip Tracy's mentions in one of the articles, and he does do brilliant hats. But it's also the picture there of the King dancing. It wasn't long, it was just the other week when the New Zealand team were giving him hugs at an event, and now he's dancing at an event. So He's certainly been life and soul of the
And I presume this headline is a pun on one of their songs.
Yes, it is a song.
Because it didn't mean a lot to me.
Yeah, well spotted. Mary and David, thank you very much. We'll see you in the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take a look at the weather in the meantime. Well, most places look fine again tomorrow, but wind and rain will sweep eastwards over the weekend. England and Wales will have a mostly clear start, if chilly, but there'll be fog patches around. Elsewhere, it'll be cloudier and milder with a brisk wind and outbreaks of light rain. Ireland, Northern Ireland and northern and western Scotland will see further spells of rain through the morning. Elsewhere, it'll stay mainly dry with plenty of sunshine, but fog may slow to clear some spots like the Vale of York. Temperatures will be around average, feeling pleasant in the sunshine again. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the world holds its breath as Israel plans its retaliation to the Iranian missile attack. We'll bring you the latest from the Middle East conflict.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want to jump in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail